नमः। नमस्ते पद्मनाभाय नमो हृत्पद्मवासिने। नमस्ते पद्मनाभाय नमो हृत्पद्मवासिने। पद्मासनस्थदेवाय पद्मासनस्थदेवाय शिवानन्दाय ते नमः। शिवानन्दाय ते नमः।
Or absolute bad about oneself. There can be an absolute bad about the country. Total bad, total problematic. So, the problems of the whole world are reflected in India's case today. Whether it's an ethnic problem, an economic problem, political instability, problem of inimical neighbors on the borders, or internal dissent and lack of mutual understanding among the people of the country, or the insiders not becoming sympathetic to the country. Insiders in the country, the insiders of the country who are having their faith and links with outsiders for our enemies. Then the spineless timidity of the among the good people of the country, and the misgovernance and weak governance, corrupt and inefficient governance of the country, where the people are not given the justice they need, people are not given the protection they need. There is no punishment for the criminal, there is no protection for the innocent. If you go on listing these things, I can make 1,000 lists. All evils are available. A man who is a citizen in the country, particularly a grey-haired old man like me, because he is more aware of this, the surrounding reality, because he doesn't hold a job where he can go to the office at 10 a.m. and forget about it. He is not rearing his children with his newly married wife. He is not holding a business, but owning a shop in the bazaar. He is not busy otherwise. So the mind is more occupied than anybody else. Such scenario, people are, and add to this, the small complaints that we receive about people's unhappy conditions around us. They come to the old man for an advice or help or guidance or a blessing. All these things, although I meet 100 people a day, either on telephone or in person, to listen to them about their difficulties, problems and their requests, that is occupying only 1/10 of my mind. The 9/10 of it is country is filling it. People ask me, how is it that you are able to answer so many calls, so many people? But this is only 1/10 of my attention. 9/10 is in the country. Country is wide. And there is no country in the world which has suffered more than India in the entire history of mankind. No other country has suffered so much like India. India has suffered in various ways, and the Hindu country, which is predominantly Hindu, was exclusively Hindu till the other day. Now Hinduism is one of the contents of this country, not very much cared for, does not occupy any respectable place in the auditorium, and neither respected nor protected nor given any importance. More than all this, the people who are not well-wishers of this culture rule this country. They have the say, their say in the run of the country, running of the country. The politics and the administration is in their hands. I would have been very happy if a non-Hindu is ruling who does not believe in Hinduism, but he gives the country a professional governance where there is no cause for complaint. Hinduism need not rule this country, but if it is a professional governance where people are quite happy with the machinery that governs, justice is done, criminal is punished, economy is sound, poverty is tackled properly, the average man enjoys his freedom to pursue his goals. And what I mean is a professional governance. Professional governance is simply this: take care of the individual citizen, whether he is the richest taxpayer or the poorest taxpayer or no taxpayer. All should have the same treatment from the government. They should get the same kind of services that they need: health, communications, education, whatever. But that is not there. Even a governance that would not give any importance to the Hinduism of this country, ignores Hinduism as rubbish, but still governs the country professionally. We had seen it. That was the British governance. Except that some of their officers were stupid and cruel while dealing with the Indians who were protesting against the government. They did not. Whereas the government had its own culture and civilization, the entire governance of this vast country was streamlined with one Indian penal code as against all regional laws, one CRPC, one civil code, one telegraphic system, one army, one civil services, something like that. That every 30 years the land used to be surveyed. Every inch of the land is mapped out and given a number. There was a kind of governance which the country had not seen before, even under the Mughals. So Mughals ruled this country. Why do I say that Hinduism can be ignored but for the benefit of a good governance? Some of the Mughals, like Akbar and his two successors, for at least about 75 years, the governance was quite tolerable, except that the Rajasthanis and the self-respecting, proud Hindus opposed them. Still, it was a sort of a governance where the annual revenue was established, taxation was established, and things like that. Before that, I mean, the kind of jizya taxation for the non-Hindu, non-Muslim, they had disappeared. Their kind of a more civilized administration was all right. Till the destroyer of the Mughals, Aurangzeb, took over. With him, he sang the song I said. In fact, but for Aurangzeb, Mughals would have continued to rule. He made them unpopular. He showed all his stupidity against the majority community of the country, showed his intolerance, and he was not kind to his own siblings. He killed his own brothers and sisters. Most cruel manner. he did not show any signs of being a human being. So the country, he lost the country threw him out. Later there were good people who were quite gentle and decent, like Akbar, but they could not wield any power beyond Delhi. One man destroyed the dynasty. In fact, cruelty of one man in a dynastic rule, in the long chain of successors and belong to one family, one evil can destroy the good dynasty. There was no such incident in the Indian dynasty's history, even up to Mahabharata times. But during the Mahabharata times, Duryodhana destroyed his own clan. He put a full stop to the dynastic rule of his own family by being an evil man. So what survives is good. What cannot survive is bad. What is bad can never survive. Today in this country, when we are not able to see a governance that is professional, pushing aside my complaint about Hinduism being insulted and all that, a straightforward professional governance is absent. So whoever is responsible for this bad governance, even claiming to be a member of the dynasty that rules this government from the birth of a new independent India, they cannot claim survival. This history has proved it. I only cited a few example things. In fact, a person thinks that he can rule the country by bribing people, by buying support, by suppressing oppression, suppressing the opposition, by oppressive means, and eliminating any kind of enemy inside the country. They think they can live forever on the throne. It is not possible. They would not continue. What is happening in this country is clearly showing an arrow mark towards the end of a bad rule. That is law of nature. That is the experience of the history in the world. Any country has seen this. And if they think they are very clever and powerful, strong, it's only for a while. It is a seemingly good scenario for them. It's not all that good, because in a bad and corrupt rule, all people who are your henchmen around you, Ji Huzur, these kind of a people, showing obedience, faith, and submission, and absolute self-surrender. They don't mean all that they are doing. All of them are aware that this is a bad rule. We are seemingly supporting them. The moment a moment arrives when this bad rule has to end, then we should take care of ourselves so that we are not bundled along with them to be destroyed. So they have their other side of their picture in their personalities. They keep their image safe somewhere else secretly. This is it. This kind of phenomenon I have seen history through and through in many stories in many countries. A bad ruler did not survive forever. Even history, many good governing monarchs, they failed to train their successors properly. And there they failed. Their successor was the last one of the dynasty. They did not survive. The dynasty did not survive. The country. What happens in a country like this? The question is, are you talking about the survival of the dynasty or the survival of the country? That's the question. Survival of the country is at stake. It is unsafe. The country itself cannot survive under bad governance. The country is quite safe, and the dynasty disappears. Absolutely nothing to worry, because many people have disappeared. What happens in a bad rule of the country that we are having today in India is the question arising before us is survival of the country in the world. country has to survive. Yes, the country did not survive the demand of the Muslims. It had to yield and part with a large chunk of land. It's no solution of the problem forever. The problem continues. The problem, Hindu-Muslim problem, continues inside the country and across the border also. Nor are the people who divided the country are happy. They are not happy. They are not able to survive in peace because it was a kind of an uncalled for action, demand based on imaginary bad governance by the Hindus. They imagined that the Hindus would destroy them after independence. They forgot the fact that the Hindus were ruled by Mughals for 5 centuries and invaded by the Muslims from outside for 4 centuries with no reaction. What could the Hindus do in the independent India? Perhaps they would have handed over the entire rule to the Muslim dynasties, allowed them rather than fight with them. Even at the cost of all independence, all happiness, Hindus are prepared to surrender themselves rather than resist and oppose. The nature to oppose a bad ruler is absent in the Hindus. So we have not seen any revolutions in the history of Hindu India. There can never be a Hindu revolution or revolution in the country from the Hindu quarters. So what happens? What does the Hindu wait for? He waits for the natural destruction, the natural end of the bad rule. But in this process, by not raising his voice against the rule, he is risking the security of his own country, because the insider and the outsider are one party. Insider and outsider they make one party. They are not interested in the country. Just why are they not interested in saving the country? They perceive it to be a Hindu majority country who don't deserve to be encouraged to survive. Unless the Hinduism is totally destroyed, this cannot be a happy country for them. They perceive the Hindu majority as a dangerous, unwanted, undesirable element in this country. That is their perception. Clearly, you can describe them like this. Unless this kind of fundamentalism, Hinduism, and kind of millions going to the temples and some kind of a stupid caste system and untouchability and all that, this is a very undesirable culture. It should go. We should make all efforts to see that it disappears from this country. Then our rule is meant to achieve this end. This kind of a perception is in their minds. That way they are wishing to, their aim is to dismiss something which is not possible. Even a foreign rule, suppose India is going to be invaded by China and they join the Muslim Pakistan to rule this country, occupy this country, I can tell you very clearly that they can never destroy Hinduism in this country. Even for 100 years, China, Pakistan combined rule of India will not be able to destroy Hinduism. It is there to survive, it is there to continue. For the simple reason, it does not harm anybody. There is no need to destroy it. Something needs to be destroyed.
So simple.
There is no need to, it's not an enemy to anybody. It's only a sitting duck for anybody to shoot. It is not harmful to anybody, it doesn't mean ill to any quarter in the world. Its resilience, its power to survive lies in the secret that it doesn't treat anybody as enemy. Even an enemy is not treated as an enemy. They know that he is their enemy, but the enemy he is not treated. There is no response to the enemy of an appropriate nature. Anybody in the world, any human being, responds to an enemy in an appropriate manner by defense or offense. Neither a defense nor an offense exist in the Hindu society. Very strange phenomenon. That is, there exactly lies the resilience and the power to survive in the Hindu society. Very strange thing. You can always imagine anybody invading this country. China sends its armies, Pakistan helps, and enough money is pumped into the pockets of Pakistan and Chinese, suppose from the Americans, and South, North Korea helps them. There is enough force which can invade this country, and there is enough weakness inside to give them a success. Okay, they establish their route finally. Some Chinchu Chang will become the Prime Minister of India. How does it matter? He lives in Delhi in his big palace, orders the police and army to shut down the temples and all that for a while. Like what I have said about a bad rule in this country just now, that bad rule, which are a result of invasion, would also die down in no time. But Hinduism survives. Again, it may be waiting for the next invasion. It's okay for the Hindus. But this is the ground reality about Hinduism. It doesn't get destroyed, doesn't resist an enemy. The enemy is welcome to hate it, invade it, destroy it, try to destroy it. But there are certain elements in the indestructible. But there is no force that can destroy the air. There is no force that can destroy the fire forever. It can be extinguished in a particular location, not destroyed. When the fuel exhausts, fire is extinguished. There is no material to consume, the fire vanishes. But then the fire element of fire is indestructible. Similarly, the Vedic principle of wishing well for the entire mankind and all living creatures on the earth, and depending on for such protection on the forces above the earth, which are truer and longer lasting, solid, more million times more powerful than all the man put together. They depend on that great force for their survival. Even if they are opening their doors and sleeping deep, lost in deep sleep, the house is protected by somebody else. There, the dependence on a superior force, giving lesser importance to one's own power to protect oneself. There is a great secret in this survival secret. A force that is not seen, heard, or touched anywhere, but which is really existing far above this, beyond the senses of perception of the human being. That's the greatest reality, and that reality has been realized by these people. That remains, that continues. Whatever be the internal changes that are brought about by some kind of self-styled reformers and intellectuals who try to reveal the greater secret than what is available here, they have not survived. Whether Buddhism or Jainism, internal forces, they have taken only a part of the Hindu culture. But when they rejected the bulk of the Hindu culture, they did not survive. Whoever has accepted the bulk, majority of the major content of the Hindu society and their culture, they have survived. We have so many examples. There are great men who are worshipped as sages, men of wisdom, elevated souls, who have realized souls, and all the rest of it in their description. They criticize, suppose some great man in Kashi criticized the man who is bathing in Ganges. Kabir. You are bathing in Ganges. How can your sins be washed away? What is the kind of the benefit you are getting? You find fish in them, in the waters. What kind of a benefit the fish is getting? Then if the fish cannot get anything, how can you? This is a very simple, stupid argument. In fact, the fish are not taking a bath like this fellow. The fish is not enjoying any protection of the God of our imagination. The fish are not thinking of the sacredness of the rivers, Ganges waters. It is just an animal. The man is totally different, 100 times far better, knowledgeable, with a heart and mind and faith, with a teaching that he has received over generations, in which he deeply believes. Definitely he is going to be benefited, not the fish at all. And if one is trying to compare these two, he has lost the power of comparison. And he seems to be more intent on comparing the man to a fish, as though he has not found any kind of difference. How can a man be compared to a fish? But that kind of a teaching did not survive, even for 10 years. Even 10 people did not come out to the Ganges after listening to this talk. They continued to bathe. And not only that, people are coming 1,000 miles away. All the way, some people are even walking to Ganges. They are making hazardous travel. Millions are traveling, millions are taking bath in Ganges. Somebody may say, Ganges is all dirty, I don't touch this water, non-hygienic. But the people who are bathing and drinking the Ganges water are not falling ill. All of them are not dying of any infection. There is something that is in this, because the Hindu believes in the superior force that rules the entire creation being present in the waters. His faith is answered by the real presence of the water, presence of the divinity in that water only for himself, not for the others. There are others also taking bath. To them it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist to them, for them. Because in their mind it doesn't exist. Mind rules, faith rules. The faith of the Hindu is unparalleled. Communism has come from outside. Many thousands of people have joined the Communist Party condemning Hinduism, all faith, all idol worship, and so on. That has not changed the fabric of Hindu society in any noticeable way. What continues Hinduism, the stability of the Hinduism continues. It's like a huge river, always on tide, always on floods. The floods continue throughout the year. There is nothing like a flood time. Throughout the year, all the years, fully the river flows. It is not affected. We do not know from where the source of water flooding the river. Although every minute to minute it's emptying itself into this ocean, the flood continues. Nothing is happening to this Hinduism. It continues. What remains to be done is to tell the evil rulers about this secret. To educate them with all friendly gestures and love, kiss him on his cheek and tell him this truth. That you will not be succeeding. You cannot do anything about this. Your hate remains inside you. Your hate of Hinduism is the mole that suffers you, makes you suffer inside you. It is like a cancer. You have to live with it. Living with the hatred, unable to do anything, is the worst scenario. I hate something, I cannot do anything. I spend sleepless nights, ultimately suffer some disorder. This is a very strange thing. What remains to be done is to educate the people who are trying to dismiss this, wish away this Hinduism and all that. Is not possible. I can tell you, even God cannot do it. How can you say this with God? Because it is, suppose God wants to see that the Hinduism does not exist anymore. Since He has already committed Himself to bless this, to live forever, already long ago, today He cannot go back on His. Seriously. So, it's not possible for everyone. What remains is I started my sentence with all that is suffering that we are having, all the kind of 100 types of problems inside the country and all that. Problems are there. If you want to solve any problem, do it. But not imagine that is going to destroy Hinduism. Every problem has to be solved. In fact, one day's indigestion doesn't kill a man. It is curable. 2 tablets are enough. One day's headache does not kill a man. It's like a strong built of a man suffering from a few small complaints. They don't kill him. He either ignores them or cures them. Similarly, in Hindu India, the people seem to be occasionally telling me but nothing is going to happen. We are all helpless, like something is going to happen today or tomorrow. The future is threatening, and people say, yes, there may be some greater degree of suffering of the Hindu society in general. Somebody can misbehave with it and harm it also for a while. Even that for a while, why should it happen? Let us try to protect this, deal with the evil forces from within and out, without. Try to do something. That is the need of the hour. Nobody, I am trying to protect Hinduism. One need not say this. You don't have to protect Hinduism. It's like saying they can destroy the temple but not the god. Temples have been destroyed. Could they destroy the god? Or could they destroy the god in the heart of the Hindu? That is much more difficult. You can destroy 100 temples. You cannot destroy. Where people are prepared to die at the hands of the evil forces, but not lose his faith. So there is something special about this ancient India that is indestructible, that faces an enmity all time for thousands of years and thousands of in the past and the thousands of years to come also. It is bound to happen. Occasionally we are bound to have enmity and people who hate us, who don't want us to survive. But they don't survive, we survive. Future, past, present and future. This scenario. Am I right? Logical comes together. Buddha was a great man. What could he do about Hinduism? Could he destroy the caste system? Could he destroy the Vedic ritualism? Could he destroy the idol worship? Could he destroy the worship of God in many forms, with or without idol? There is no idol, there is a mantra. There is no temple for mantra. Only for an idol there is. No mantra has been ever withdrawn from the society. No two mantras have ever been wished away. Buddha has gone. Buddhism has gone. But everything survives. That's very strange. In fact, in the secret is, how can it survive when there are bad people in the society? Yes, there were bad people who are known as Rakshasas. But they also worship the same god which are others. The others are worshipped. They did penance to please Brahma. They did penance to please Rudra, but they were bad people. They might have disappeared from the earth, but the path in which the path that they followed is a forever path. On account of bad people, insider, being an insider of the culture was not destroyed. In any other culture, if there are so many bad people like Hinduism had, that culture would have been destroyed. Try to understand what I say. I don't know whether I am clear. Many Rakshasas were born in this Hinduism, Vedic religion. Their activity, their presence did not destroy the culture in which they were born. A bad Christian can destroy Christianity. Today that is happening. There are bad bishops facing investigations for crimes of subhuman nature. That is destroying the very respectable Islam also. So in fact, in any other culture, any religion, 10 bad people can bring down the respectability of the religion, and if that generation repeats itself over a century, it gets lost. It does not happen. Because even the Rakshasas worship the same god for self-aggrandizement. They wanted power to rule over the higher worlds also. They did so for a while. They disappeared. But that has their presence, their tapas, their history has not discredited Hinduism. Like a bad bishop can discredit the respectability of Christianity. See the difference.
But they are all worshipping the same God.
Yes.
God is only one.
Worship the same God. In fact, the sustainability of the faith itself is not total and complete. It has limitation. It limits itself, and also it is arrogating to itself to convert the rest of the humanity into their fold, assuming that their fold, their faith is the highest and the greatest, without understanding the greatness of the other religions. So they are suffering from a faulty principle. So such a flimsy faith can be destroyed by 10 bad people. This is not destroyed. Today you can have all the Rakshasas, the entire pantheon of Rakshasa for over several millennia, అంటే ఏమిటి రావణాసురుడు, హిరణ్యాసురుడు, అందరూ రమ్మనుడు. All of them can come and make their presence felt within Hinduism. Even then, it does not discredit the faith itself. Faith is such that nobody can discredit that faith, showing an example of a bad man inside. This bad man is two bad people inside the Congress party can discredit it. 3 bad people in the Telugudesam, they can destroy the party. They are destructible basically because of the flimsy nature, shallow nature of its fundamental philosophical principle. That difference is there. I don't dislike Christianity. I don't dismiss Christianity or Islam as unwanted or bad or nothing like that. But what about the flimsy platform on which they are built up? The platform on which the superstructure is built up is shaky. Whenever the faith is quite shaky, it doesn't have a sound foundation, they try to spread. It is the indication of their inner nature. When somebody wants to spread convert others into his faith, the faith must be automatically bad and weak in itself, depending on conversions, I would say. Whereas Islam is depending on destruction. There should be no non-Muslim living on there. But in fact, this kind of an inner weakness, it's a fault line in the stability of their ground. They don't survive because there is another way of saying it also. They have come in midway in the history of mankind. Midway they might destroy. That I am not wishing for it. I am not praying the God to destroy all the other religions because I don't need to pray. Nor do I need to pray for the stability of Hinduism. It's very strange. I mean, kind of one analysis. I thought of it. చాలా చిత్రంగా ఉంది ఈ దేశం, చాలా థ్రెటనింగ్గా కనిపిస్తుంది. Every day they are building new temples, bringing about new gods in human form. A pantheon is expanding like the parliament and things like that. There is an opposition also inside the Hinduism. There is an opposition benches criticizing idol worship, criticizing caste system, criticizing temple culture. That's the opposition inside the parliament of Hinduism. But they don't matter. They keep on shouting, say, losing opposition. But there is an opposition, no, just to oppose. That's all about it. Like in our mock parliament, always we had an opposition, just to oppose, not to succeed. Never to succeed. Some benches are allotted for that. Somebody has to sit there, sit on them. You have to be occupied. Put somebody. If nobody is elected in the opposition, ruling party supplies the material. ఏమంటే ఏముంది ఇందులో? ఎన్ని రిఫార్మ్స్, ఆర్య సమాజ్ ఏం చేసింది? వాట్ కుడ్ దే డూ? So I am able to perceive the continuity of this great culture. But whether it is good for the humanity or whether it is good for the God or not, it has to continue. Because originally it received the blessing for the longest possible life on earth. As long as the earth is there,
Commitment.
but it is commitment of the Almighty. He cannot withdraw it. It's a registered document. ఇర్రివోకబుల్ అట్లా అయిపోయింది. ఇది ఉంటుంది. నాకు బాగా అనలైజ్ చేసిన తర్వాత ఈ మాటలు చెప్తున్నాను. ఐ హ్యావ్ అనలైజ్ ది ప్రోస్ అండ్ కాన్స్ అండ్ ఎవ్రీథింగ్ స్టోరీ. బికాస్ యాజ్ ఐ టోల్డ్ యూ 9/10 of my attention, thought, feeling are occupied by the country.
చాలా హోప్ వచ్చేసింది.
Hope. అంటే ఐ హ్యావ్ నెవర్ బీన్ హోప్లెస్ అబౌట్ దిస్. ఇప్పుడు ఏంటంటే ఐఎమ్ ఓన్లీ థింకింగ్ ఆఫ్ రిపేర్ మెథడాలజీ ఆఫ్ ఎనీథింగ్ దట్ ఈస్ గోయింగ్ రాంగ్. Bad governance, that is, in fact, they are bad for themselves. A bad government is bad for themselves. When the society continues, there is a forever population. Country has its borders, the land of the country, the people of the country, population of the country. It is a forever material. Bad government is a passing phase. They end up in
Will we continue to shrink borders? But Pakistan and
yes,
tomorrow Christians and Muslims want a separate country.
yes,
Is such a thing?
that is not possible. So far as Christianism, that's not possible. But one possibility, it is not a probable thing. Pakistan would like to occupy Kashmir, and our people are prepared internally, due to their internal weakness, prepared to surrender half of the Kashmir to them. But at the same time, they would not be able to govern the rest of the Kashmir also, because of their inherent weakness, not only the strength of the enemy. Your weakness is the strength of your enemy. Not that the enemy is such a superficial, super strong and things like that. He is not a great. Is Pakistan a great power? Compared to India, is Pakistan a great power? For that matter, is North Korea a great power? But even China is not such a great power about which we should be afraid. They can never walk to Delhi and occupy it. It's not possible. There was a time when a few marauders and people walked across the borders and occupied Delhi for a while. But when the Mughals came after the 13th or 14th century, late 15th century onwards, they occupied India due to their positive qualities, certain positive qualities, not all. They were not like the earlier invaders. They had to establish their religion side by side with this Hinduism. They did not mean to attack Hinduism all the time. There was some kind of a human quality in them, a kind of a civilized part of it. For that matter, even that part of the British mentality, which is more civilized, that had ruled India, not mere this one. After all, we said that the entire British army, all the British officers, from Viceroy down to the common man, all whites, and a pitiful minority, if the Hindus had attacked them, they would have been destroyed. They were allowed to live. They were only opposed and not destroyed. They were asked to get out, but not killed. That is why some part of their civilized habits made them survive. At the same time, the tolerance and Hindus tolerance. The moment of if there is a moment when intolerance seizes the mind of the Hindu, at least 25% of the Hindu population, nothing can survive against it. Everything is tolerated. The injury is tolerated. A bad inimical attitude of the enemy is tolerated. It is, I would say, it is a resilience. It is a strong point of the Hindu society. Not that we approve it. We don't approve it, but there is strength of it. It can be destroyed. In 1 month, many evil forces in India can be destroyed if the Hindu takes it to his head, takes to street violence. Because people are talking of Hindu terrorism, that is totally an absurd concept. If it were to be there, because suppose they go on doing jabam about Hindu terrorism, it may start growing. On account of they would be creating it. But that is such a terrific force, it can neither be controlled nor opposed, and nothing can survive in the face of it. Thank God it has never raised its ugly head, it is totally absent. Sometimes the violent thoughts may pass over the mind of a Hindu. The moment he takes a sword and tries to walk out, again the inner voice takes him back. He cannot do it. If it were so, long ago, many enemies would have been destroyed inside India. They would not have been thrown. We may talk of disunity among the Hindus and things like that. All that is okay. Disunity is a kind of callousness. Some people are shouting, what can they don't have to be tackled this way. Let us put up after all, he will go, he will vanish. Nothing is going to happen to our country. Kind of a laissez-faire attitude. There, inside this laissez-faire attitude, inside this kind of callousness, inside this negligent attitude, taking things lightly, at the bottom of it, there is a faith in God. Faith in God releases this kind of an attitude from the bottom too. A man who believes in God, like the Hindu, can never destroy an enemy in the open. It's difficult for him to rise. I saw a film on the 15th August. It was probably a Hindi film rendered into Malayalam. The Hindu regiment on the border of Pakistan caught hold of 2 army men of the Pakistan army. And the Hindu commander says, I will not kill you. I will not arrest you and keep you inside the prison. You are not wanted here. I want you to get away. Go back to your army. I will release you just like this. And he released him. The next battle, this commander was overpowered. He was commanding only 1 battalion, whole 10 regiments of the Pakistan army. Caught hold of. This man is caught, arrested and taken away to the other side of the border, and they killed him by continuous torture for 24 hours, driving needles into his ears, plucking away his eyes, cutting his tongue. He was tortured for 24 hours. Almost after 12 hours, he almost died. Still there was life. And the dead body is thrown across the water into the sea. And the other soldiers in the Indian contingent cry over. They fretting and fuming. This man showed undue clemency, undue kindness to a bad man. He suffered. This is a great lesson for all of us. Look at how the great man who was our commander. The way in which he was. Eyes are gouged, eyes bleeding was profuse from the ears because it was, tongue was cut off. They saw the dead body, they cried and became angry. They take an oath that we will never tolerate. If we are able to catch one enemy, on the spot he should be finished. And if this torture can be repeated, we will certainly do it. And then another commander comes and don't take such decisions. Evil is evil, they are bad, we are not bad. We will go on our own philosophy. Kind of picture in Malayalam.
This is the story of
He
Prithviraj.
will show the torture scenes, horrible torture scenes. I don't know how the director was able to make it.
Prithviraj Chauhan also same thing.
I mean, recently the same theme is being repeated every day. People are thinking of this. Yeah. Those scenes of torture of the army officer by and these 2 people who were let off without punishment, without touching, they enjoy the sight of their torture. शाबाश, ये देखो वो देखो. Dante, why did this film director show this scene to us? To make us, to tell us what is right about him in dealing with an enemy, what is not right in dealing with an enemy. It's a common experience of the Indian soldier. He behaves on principles of nobility. He succumbs to the bad enemy. Still there is a feeling in the country for making such films.
Same thing happened in Bangladesh. People, 90,000 people were surrendered. Just 90,000 people.
Our history is replete with the nobility versus evil. Perhaps the evil is returned by evil. History would have been different. But perhaps we would have lost our soul in the process. That faith of tolerance, faith in God. After all is said and done, no sin goes unpunished. In this world, the punisher is the divinity, not we. We are suffering on account of our destiny. Kind of a philosophy, a deep-rooted philosophy in the mind of the Indian. This is true in a larger sense. In a deeper sense, this is an ultimate truth, no doubt about it. I mean, when Draupadi argues with Yudhishthir,
Protecting us.
protecting us, because how you ask me to pardon these Kauravas? You are always talking about the greatness of pardon. Can you expect me to forget the insult? Can a woman insulted in the presence of her husband in an open court, you attacked by foul language, insulted, disrobed, can a woman tolerate this and forget about it? And added to this, you are not asking me to forget about it because unforgettable. You are asking me to pardon them. You are talking about the qualities of pardon in the context of moksha or reaching the God or the qualities of great sages. All that is okay. Am I a sage? Am I a seeker of moksha? I am your wife. And in one context, this is seen about 4 or 5 times she argues with Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira says, Draupadi, you have been insulted. You have been disrobed in the open court, in my presence. But when I am present there, don't you think the entire insult is to me and not to you? I have taken the insult. When I have taken the total insult, that is heaped on you, it is mine. Then you can transfer the whole pain to me. You forget, that's my argument. Then she becomes silent. Why did you tolerate? I have resilience, I have enormous strength to tolerate any insult, any evil. That is my stand, it is my nature. So I am advising you to forget about it, or if you cannot forget it, forgive them. I am not forgiving them. It is for me to forgive them or not forgive them, because the entire insult is heaped on me. The entire scenario, the intention is to insult me by insulting you. Kind of wonderful argument. 4 or 5 places the conversation takes place to Draupadi and Yudhishthira. I mean, you have to side with both. You have to agree with Draupadi, you have to agree with this man. There is no judgment possible in this. Both are absolutely right. And this kind of a depth of philosophical concepts you cannot imagine in all the religious texts put together in the rest of the world. This simple argument is the height of wisdom. It can't be greater than this. Nothing can be greater than this. 2 characters totally justified in what they say, disagreeing with each other. The point is, if I am insulted, who are you to pardon? I must pardon them. I don't pardon them. You must agree with me, my not pardoning them. The insult is not yours, it's mine, he said. సో ఎనీవే అన్నీ కూడా ప్రపంచంలో ఒక్క భారతమే చాలు మొత్తం హిందూ కల్చర్ అంతా అండర్స్టాండ్ చేసుకోవడానికి.
ఇండిపెండెన్స్ మూమెంట్ సుభాష్ చంద్రబోస్ చేసిన స్టాండ్ సుభాష్ చంద్రబోస్
సుభాష్ చంద్రబోస్ ఈజ్ ఆల్సో రైట్, గాంధీ ఈజ్ ఆల్సో రైట్, అదే నేను చెప్పేది.
That's the point.
I have never disagreed with either of them. Subhash Chandra Bose is absolutely right. He is a Kshatriya. This Gandhiji is a Brahmin's attitude. A Brahmin should be like this. Kshatriya should be like that. Okay. Both are right అంటాను నేను. Like this, ఇప్పుడు two characters I spoke about Mahabharata.
But they both different Brahmin.
They can do, yes. Kshatriya should not talk like a Brahmin. Brahmin should not talk like a Kshatriya.
He did not follow the instructions of a Brahmin.
Why? He
He
did
has
not.
his own way.
In the matter of defense, defending the country or throwing out the enemy of the country, who is an occupier,
Each has his own method.
Kshatriya has his own attitude. That is Kshatram. Gandhi need not agree with, approve with him, but he should be able to understand the Kshatriya attitude. Gandhi, it's for Gandhi to understand the attitude of a Kshatriya, which ought to be like that.
But he did not understand
And
like
it is for Bose to understand the Brahmin's attitude in Gandhi. It should be like that. Understanding each other perfectly, but disagreeing.
That's
Both are
Yes,
different.
there are so many situations in this history of the country. I said the Indian National Army, Shabash Ranani, much better. All people, all Hindus are going to be Gandhis. Then why should the British go? They don't do anything. They only ask them to go. They need not go. They don't go. We will not attack you. సత్యాగ్రహం చేస్తాం, భోజనం మానేసి చచ్చిపోతాం, ఉపవాసం ఉంటాం, విల్ గో ఆన్ ఫాస్టింగ్ అన్ టు డెత్. All right, you will die. We will try to put you in the hospital forcibly. If you want to die, you die. But we will not quit. Because there is only absolute non-violence. అంతే కదా, they don't have to quit at all. So the objective is not achieved. Here the field of action is Shatram. If you think British are your enemy, you want them to go out on account of your protest, because you are on fast and up to death, looking at your pitiable condition, they should quit according to you. You are appealing to their conscience. They have no conscience. So they will continue. You continue to be ruled, but you go on fast and die every day by the million. It's okay. They don't recognize their conscience does not recognize you. They think they are right in Akbar. And they always have been, every day they have been, day in and day out they have been shouting, telling the whole world, we are not occupying India. We are helping India to improve itself. On account of us, India's great future is in our hands. We are not occupiers. We are not colonizers. We are friends.
It's a burden.
If we leave, India will fall to pieces. That has been their argument. They claim to be ambitious, not like Mughals. An improvement on Mughal.
This argument about Shastra, Aurobindo also.
Aurobindo.
Gandhi does not understand
Yes.
Gita. It is conversation between two Kshatriya warriors on a battlefield.
That's right.
So Gandhiji's interpretation is wrong.
Not wrong.
He doesn't understand.
Because the object is different. It's okay if it is personal enemy. Somebody has harmed him. Somebody has looted his house, killed his members of his family. He can pardon them or go on fast. That's a different, but not for the sake of the country that he can. How can he administer a failing concept which does not appeal to the conscience of your enemy, occupier?
But in Mahabharata, it is an insult to the individual. The country is not involved there. But
Country
they fought and they prefer to fight.
It's not insulting Gadidi. We are not. That is why I have written 100 pages at one time. Why independence? Why should we have independence? Is a basic question. If you can support by a thorough argument that India ought to be independent, should not be ruled by outsiders, by substantial reasoning, I would have substantial reasoning is to get back to our cultural roots, which is why we should be independent, not for running this an inefficient government like this. That government was far better than this. To the point, why did we want this independence is a very question. I try to make out the argument that we have to go back to our roots of our culture. Those roots of our culture are dismissed as unimportant. They are not right for the moment of the present day of history by of the occupiers. So they don't agree with our culture. We cannot agree with their argument that our culture is outdated. Which is why we want to rule ourselves in Jew faith, Jew obedience to our ancestors' teaching and preaching. We want to protect our culture by being an independent nation. That purpose has failed after independence. That's actually the last sentence of remember. The very purpose of asking for independence and getting independence has not been achieved. It has been eschewed. That is the failure.
Gandhi also lacked this understanding.
No, Gandhi was in his last days. Independence, he did not live in independent India. So what was his perception about India? Just because although he was a British citizen, he was thrown out the train in Durban or somewhere in South Africa. So that insult to him triggered the Kshatriya fighter in him. But again he remained to be a kind of different kind of fighter. But he mopped up the people. He gathered many people to protest by inciting the anger of the people against the British rule in South Africa. He came victorious because that was a civilized government. Again I am telling. The court agreed with him, made him release him. That is exactly where the civilized part of the British was there. That was their merit. Today we are following the judiciary and system of justice laid down by the British. We cannot replace it with a better system. Because there is no, the entire country has to be ruled by one system. The Hindu law was by Mullah. There are many judgments against the British government. For example, Vallur Suryanarayan Rao filed a petition against the local police station officer and the DSP and the Superintendent of Police, representing the British government, British Crown, Secretary of State for India. His plea was Secretary of State for India should pay me the compensation for having been insulted by the local police. I was walking on the left of the road. I did not have a shirt on. I had a dhoti, khadi dhoti and khadi towel with a Gandhi cap. I am an old man. He pushed me aside, the head constable, and I went and complained to the SI. You should have given you 2 cuts also. He left you without beating you. You must thank him, he said. I went to the circle inspector. I agreed with the SI, he said. You were wrong not to have beaten you, he said, because you were Gandhi cap and other you look like an ugly man. The DSP said the same. Then he stopped complaining to anybody. He went to the collector. I have no time to look into these matters. You can send an application to the collector. Then the case went on till the local district judge directed the police, directed the collector to pay 50 rupees compensation, which is he is claiming for having been insulted with cost. And the government appealed to the High Court. High Court confirmed the order of the district judge, directed the Secretary of State for India to pay the compensation with cost, which amounted to 225 rupees. His claim was only for 50 rupees. And the judgment was not implemented. They would not pay the money. What is there? What can you do? And the 3 years is the time for implementation of the execution of the. So it's called EP, execution petition. The order has to be implemented, executed. He waited till the last day, deliberately, and filed a petition. I have to get 225 rupees from the government, from the state, I would like to please give me permission to auction the furniture in the court to get paid. Yes, the judge has to give a permission to it. It's the order of the High Court. In whatever manner he likes. It has not been paid voluntarily by the collector. So he has to give permission. He went on pleading, begging this man in the open court. Kindly give me 2 hours time. Kindly give me time. Don't insist on the AP. This happened in the Elur court. And the telephone, that was Saturday afternoon. Already the treasury is closed at 1 o'clock. Who will? And the collector is speaking because he was a British judge, British collector. He spoke to the British collector. The judge said, open the treasury as a special case. See that the money is paid in my presence in this court to this man. With a letter of apology from the collector. The court directed the collector to give a letter of apology. We beg you to pardon our negligence in not paying, by not paying you the due money. Please accept this money now. Before 3 o'clock, the treasury has opened, the money was brought to the district court. Before the district court, the money was paid to you with a letter of apology. That was British judiciary. Can you have hope? Today in Indian country, in Indian government, this cannot happen.
No.
Never.
For killing a national enemy, a criminal, the state government is being tried for as though it is all justice. Today we are ruled by enemies of law. It's a very famous case. Secretary of State for India, property akadundi. The property of Secretary of State for India is the furniture in the court. So he can proceed by auctioning the property. Yeah. Respected sir, please pardon me, I have got the parties also who are prepared to buy the furniture in the auction. May I have the benefit of your order, sir? Mr. Suryanandra, please come to the chamber. I want to discuss it. Called but do not. Because if such a thing happens, the whole thing will be reported in the papers. The judge, the collector, all the concerned officials would be sacked for bringing this insulting condition to the Secretary of State. Would have been such a అంటే అలాంటి బ్రిటిష్ సిస్టమ్ని మనం ఫాలో అవడం బాగుంది. వాట్ రిమైన్స్ ఇన్ ది బ్రిటిష్ hierarchy, British hegemony, which continues here, is one system. Certain systems are still working. What has been introduced by us in all our great originality after independence? Where did we show our great originality and genius in running the country? Over and above that of the British? I don't see anything. So, in fact, this is a country which accepts the merit of even the enemy, which is the strength of its survival. They could not act. ఇలాంటి కేసెస్ జరిగాయి. సెక్రటరీ ఆఫ్ స్టేట్ ఫర్ ఇండియా మీద జడ్జిమెంట్ ఇచ్చారు హైకోర్టు, డిస్ట్రిక్ట్ జడ్జి ఇచ్చాడు. సబ్ ఇన్స్పెక్టర్ హ్యాస్ నో బిజినెస్, హెడ్ కానిస్టేబుల్ హ్యాస్ నో బిజినెస్, he is secretly warned to behave better. He is a citizen, he is a British citizen, he is a British citizen. A government cannot insult its own citizen. The police must be punished and that. ఎన్నో సమస్యలు జరిగాయి చెప్పేది. Hour 10 minutes మాట్లాడుతున్నాం.